Good evening. Has everybody come in? There's no longer a line out there, is there? No? Excellent. I'd like to call to order the Municipal Services Committee of the Board of Trustees of the Village of Wilmette today, Wednesday, May 3rd at 5 p.m. The first item on our agenda tonight is the approval of minutes of the April 6th, 2017 meeting of the Municipal Services Committee. Has everyone had a chance to read those? Any changes, modifications, clarifications?
I believe Mr. Obell's comments were not mentioned and should be in the minutes.
They're in the revised.
They're in the
They're in the
revised ones.
revised.
Okay, very good.
So, any other modifications or changes? Is there a motion to approve those minutes?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
So, I want to start by thanking everybody for coming out here tonight. There's a very large number of people here, as we can see, and I want to make sure that everyone who wants to be heard can be heard tonight. This is the final meeting of this committee, and our goal is to make a decision on two final decision points around roadway configuration and the parking in the village. We have the council room for the next 2 hours. 7 o'clock is our drop-dead time when the zoning board will begin to prepare for their meeting, which follows our meeting, and you're welcome to stay for that meeting as well. The committee has received and reviewed dozens of comments on Central Avenue and has taken all of those into account, and probably more public comment than I've seen in quite a while. So when we do get to the public comment section of the evening, I'd appreciate it if you could cover new topics that have not been heard, would be most relevant and pertinent to us because we have read all the comments that have been submitted previously. So with that said, I'd like to turn it over to Bridget, who can help get us through this.
Thank you, Chairman Kruger. For those of you who might not be familiar with the Central Avenue project, this project is very similar to Sheridan Road, reconstruction back in 2008, 2009. It's the same funding source. It's a federal grant that will be paying for 70% of the design and construction for this project. The process is three-phase. Phase one is basically a feasibility study. Phase two is the actual design and preparation of plans and specifications, and phase three is construction. We are currently near the tail end of phase one, which is getting all the design details ready so the consultant has enough information to actually put the plans together. This is our third public meeting. The first one was in November, where we took a lot of public comment. It was an open house style. Perhaps many of you were there, and we thank you for your comments. We also provided a resident survey and received hundreds or so responses back, so we also appreciate your feedback. We took that feedback and then prepared some design options that were presented at the last meeting in April. And from that meeting, there's two decision points that still have to be determined by this committee, and that is the roadway configuration. What will the road look like between travel lanes, parking lanes, and shared bike lanes, and the back-in angled parking in the downtown. So with that as an introduction, I'd like to introduce Brian Fairwood from TRUSTEES, who is representing the consulting firm of TRUSTEES tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. As that was already mentioned, we're here tonight to provide some additional information to help the committee on these two decision points. So a quick agenda for the evening. We're going to review some additional information that we've been able to obtain for both the roadway configuration and the back-end parking. There will be an opportunity this evening for public comment, and then, of course, follow up with committee discussion. So our first decision point, now known as decision point 1, relates to the roadway geometry and configuration of the street. And as part of our studies, we looked at now 4 options. Option 1, which is not accommodating bike lanes in any fashion, so really matching what's out there today. Option 2 is with dedicated bike lanes, where it was actually removed from consideration based on the impacts that we saw for that configuration. Option 3 is known as a shared lane option, with parking maintained on the south side and losing parking on the north side. And then we've looked at an additional option, which we're calling 3A, which is a shared lane configuration that has parking on either the north or the south side where it can be accommodated. So we're going to walk through option 1 and the 2 option 3s today with you so we can provide you with additional information to help you with your decision tonight. So from a cross-section perspective, if we take a look and compare the two options that we're really considering this evening, you get a sense on what you have now with option 1, where we currently do not have bike lanes, but we do have a travel lane in each direction, which you see with the yellow arrows, and then we also have on-street parking generally in all locations. There are some restrictions that we'll get to here in a minute. And you see, of course, a picture of Central and what that looks like. Option 3 and 3A then would add bike accommodations through a shared lane, which you see in that cross-section. So you still have one travel lane in each direction as indicated by the yellow arrows. And now we would have parking on one side of the street, either the north or the south side. This particular, if we're looking to the east, this would be on the south side, but 3A does have some parking in stretches on the north side, and we'll get to that here in a minute. The shared lane is identified in that photo to the right, or my right, where you get a sense it's not a separate bike lane, but there are the markings in the pavement, and the intent here is that the vehicles, cars and bikes, share a wider lane to accommodate both. So taking a deeper look at option 1, really it's best depicted by the picture on the right. It's what you have today, with the exception that there would be new pavement in place of what we currently have. The overhead view gives you a sense of what that could look like. From a new perspective, maintaining parking on both sides of the street. There's the option to put in that white edge line to help to mark the parking lane, although it's not required. So you could have back what you have today. And once again, you see the travel lane in each direction and the sidewalks. Remember, this improvement, based on the objectives of this project, is to keep the curb lines at their existing width. And we've talked about this at our last meeting, that those curb lines do vary throughout Central Avenue. And so the options that we're presenting tonight take that into account and what can be made available from a parking and a biking consideration. So when we look at options 3 and 3A, the cross-section is, we've already described, you have one lane in each direction with parking on one side of the street and the shared bike lane with the vehicle lanes. We were proposing either a 15 or 16-foot shared lane. Once again, that depends on the section that we're in because our cross-section does vary. You get an overhead view of what that looks like there with the painted pavement markings, and you see, in this case, we have parking shown on the south side with the shared lane along with the vehicles. And to the left, this was taken from a photo on a similar street in the city of Elgin, where we had the same configuration going from traveling in each direction, parking on both sides of the street, where now we have parking just limited to one side of the street. So that's how this option could look. Whether that's on the north or south side differentiates between 3 and 3A.
Can you back up?
Sure.
One slide for a second. That picture is slightly different than we have in our packet. This one is different than that one.
Oh, yeah, it is. Yeah.
Okay. Thanks.
So as part of our evaluation in terms of option 1 or option 3 or option 3A, we want to make sure that we're presenting what some of the potential impacts could be. So as it relates to parking, we've done an analysis or an inventory of what we currently have within the Central Avenue corridor, and we focused mainly in the residential section. So this is really the focus on the section between 11th Street and Sheridan Road. And so on the top of this slide, you see that currently there are 229 spaces that are available when you combine both the north and south side of the streets. Now, while parking is allowed, it is important to note that there are two locations where there are currently parking restrictions. One, of course, is in front of the elementary school, and the other is on the north side of the street between 4th and Sheridan. That is the area where the pavement is much narrower than the other sections. It's down to 28 feet, and so there is not the ability to provide parking on both sides of the street in this section, and right now there is not parking on the north side of the street. So if we were to go with option 1, we would be able to maintain all the parking that you see today. So 100% of those spaces would be maintained with option 1. If we look at option 3, which we did present at the last meeting in April, you get a sense on what the impacts could be from a parking perspective. So you see marked with the red crossing or the red hatching that parking would be removed on the north side of the street between 11th and 4th. We're still showing those locations where it's restricted today. And then there would also need to be parking removed on the south side of Central between 4th and Sheridan, as you see listed there. So when you take a tally of those spaces, this option allows you to maintain 104 of the 229 spaces in that residential section, about 45% of what you have today. For option 3A, which is a new option being considered this evening, we looked at an opportunity to stagger the parking. Whereas in this scenario, we're showing that we're going to maintain the parking on the south side between 11th and 8th, and then we're going to maintain the parking on the north side between 8th and 4th. And when we do it this way, we actually gain 7 more spaces than just what we reviewed as part of option 3. And so we can maintain 111 of those 229 spaces, or 48% of the spaces. These two options will allow the street to accommodate the shared bike lane, along with maintaining some of the parking. So at the last meeting, there was questions raised in terms of what other impacts could there be. One that we heard was related to the driveways and which side of the street had driveways and which didn't, and that helped us determine where it made sense if we were going to stagger the parking on one side of the street or the other, where we would try to accommodate those residences that don't have the driveways. So when we looked at this analysis, you see here in the highlighted yellow, there were only 2 drives in the stretch of 22 homes between 11th and 8th on the south side of the street. And then conversely, on the north side of the street between 8th and 4th, there's only 4 drives for the 27 residences there. And you see the numbers in blue for the other locations. And so 3A goes to appease that or accommodate that a little bit by maintaining the parking on that side of the street that has the least number of drives within those sections. At our last meeting, we had analysis related to parking counts throughout the corridor, and since that time, we've gone and conducted several additional counts to try to get an understanding or handle of the data, and you can see the dates and times that these were done. We now have data for 18 counts, and when we look at the complete corridor with 229 spaces available, we still have capacity throughout. The largest time, or the largest usage that we ever saw was 70. So only 30% of the overall capacity was ever used at any one time. And that happened to be on a Sunday morning in that area by the school and church. You see some of these other higher parking volumes, and you see that they're tied heavily to that area by the school between 8th and 11th. So if we're going down the line on October 5th, on a Wednesday, there were 55 cars parked throughout the corridor. 38 of those were in that area by the school. And when we look at, when we continue going down that list, you see that those numbers are tied considerably to the daily usage that's needed for the school. When we look at it from a block-by-block basis for the three options, so option 1 is the first column there. You see that there's 229 spaces. That's what's there today, so option 1 is maintaining existing. Option 3, as we mentioned, we see that number come down to 104, and you can see block by block the changes. Option 3A, we see that number tick up a bit to 111, and we took a worst case scenario. So that column that identifies the highest count actually takes the data from the last page, so all the 18 counts that we conducted, and it takes the highest count in that block for all the 18 counts. So it's the absolute worst case scenario. What we saw by combining all those was a overall parking number of 93, which still, for either option 3 or 3A, is not using the entire capacity that would be available for those two options. Highlighted in yellow then does identify on a block-by-block basis areas of shortages, and you see there, once again, in that area from 9th to 10th, where we had incidences, 7 out of those 18 counts, we saw greater than 16 cars park in that area. 6 out of 7, most of those times, is during school hours. So it's all related, or predominantly related, to the school. The shortage that we see between 10th and 11th, once again, is on a weekend. We saw it in a Saturday evening count and a Sunday morning count. We talked about that attributed likely to the church. There is available capacity, however, on the north and south side streets. And overall, throughout the corridor, we still see nearly 20 spaces that would be available even in this worst case scenario. So that gets us to decision point number 1 for the committee tonight as it relates to the roadway geometry. There are 3 options really for consideration at this point. Option 1, which would be to essentially reconstruct in kind and maintain the parking as is, but not accommodate bikes by either a bike lane or a shared bike facility. Option 3 would be the shared bike lanes with parking on the south side, as we indicated as that option. And then option 3A, which is new tonight, provides a staggered parking option where we have parking on the south side in one stretch, we flip to the north side in another to come up with a little bit more than what we can see out of option 3. So at this time, we can open it for comment, we can open it for discussion, or we can go to the next point.
I think we should handle them one at a time.
Okay.
And I'd like first to ask if the trustees have any questions on what we've seen so far.
Let's see, I know we discussed this last time, but could you clarify why the parking is being dropped on the south side between 4th and Sheridan? Is it that the overall width just is not at all wide enough to accommodate?
Yes, so today, the width is 28 feet.
Okay.
That's in that stretch. And as you head from the downtown east, we see that incrementally get narrower and narrower. Mm-hmm. And so today, there is not parking allowed on the north side because of that width. It just doesn't provide for it. So by adding a shared bike lane, you've got to make that travel lane wider. These are all being designed to federal standards. We're using federal dollars. And so in order to accommodate the additional width that's needed for the shared lanes, there just wasn't enough in that 28 feet to also accommodate parking.
Okay, so there'd just be the 2 14-foot lanes.
It'd be 2 14-foot lanes that would accommodate the shared usage with bikes, but parking would not be able to fit in that
And you know, that
section.
really is illuminating to know that because it's federal money, it has to comply with federal standards. That certainly makes a lot of sense. You know, I really like option 3A. I think it has a lot to recommend it. It seems to me that the sensitivity of looking at where there are and are not drives. I know Central School was mentioned. My kids went to Central School. I have parked in those blue areas, and it seemed to me those are the areas where, you know, it is most helpful. I'm wondering, with the no parking in front of Central School, do we have an idea yet how the whole traffic situation would be handled with drop-offs there?
Well, as part of our alternatives that we looked at, we did take a quick look at the current operations and the drop-off at the school. Recommendations that were presented in the last meeting was to provide more of a paved parkway, which would allow more opportunities for the kids to get out instead of just having the carriage walks and not have to worry about being in the grass or the turfed areas. But as it relates to making any significant changes to the operations of how that currently functions, there were not any additional recommendations at this time to change how they're currently doing that.
Okay.
So at this point, I would like to open it up for public comment. Thank you very much. So we obviously have two very important decision points tonight. This is dealing right now only with the stretch from 11th to Sheridan Road. It's only about the subject we just talked about. Before I open this up for public comment, I'd like to get a show of hands for everyone who's here that is interested in this part of the discussion. There's going to be several show of hands, so feel free to participate. Okay? Good. I'd like to get a show of hands for everybody who supports, could we go back to the three options slide, by the way, who supports option 1.
Yes, this slide?
No. The green, the last slide that you had up.
Gotcha.
Okay, sorry, option 1. Okay, and how about everybody that supports option 3 or 3A? So you guys are not making it easy on us. Okay, and lastly, when you come up and speak, a couple of things. One, bear in mind that we have read all the public comment. Bear in mind that we're going to kind of separate this into two categories. Those that want to speak in favor of, actually, there's 3. So let's say everyone that wants to speak in favor of option 1 first, and everyone in favor of option 3 or 3A second. Let's divide it up like that, so that if the person in front of you or people in front of you say something that's identical to what you want to say, you can just say what that person said. And but you don't have to be limited to that, but just think that we do need to get through to a decision. We'd like to hear as many people as we could. We will limit time if people kind of keep rambling on. And so we'd like very much to kind of group together the people that are in favor of 1, option 1, and those that are in favor of 3 or 3A. And when we get to the 3 and 3A part, maybe we could queue up and hear some ideas on that differently. Trustee Sullivan.
Could you take a couple more polls? And
Sure, please.
Where I'm curious is, for those that supported option 1, how many live on Central between 11th and Sheridan? And for those, okay, so those who supported option 3 or 3A, how many live on Central between those streets? Got it. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
All righty.
Thank you.
Polls are good. They don't tell us everything, so public comment's important. So everybody who would like to support option 1, you can kind of get in a queue here. You don't need to wait for the queue to fill, but it would be good if we had an idea about how many people want to speak on option 1. You can, if you have a question, hop in line and ask the question. We want everyone to speak into the microphones, because this is being broadcast and recorded, and to please identify yourself and where you live as well. That would be very helpful. So Lead off.
Okay, I'm Kelly Gruner. I live at 610 Central, and mine are more questions, because I know you said that you're abiding by federal safety standards and how a road is constructed. All I can envision is my family, or even myself, going down Central, a bus is going, it pulls over to the right, there's a car here, and we'll pretend I'm an inexperienced biker. I don't know where to go. Do I go to the this way or this way? Does the bus know I'm here? I'm very concerned with the safety of all these things on one road. And then what happens when we get to town? You've already said it's not wide enough to do shared space there. So where are we diverted to? Where's the bike lane? How are we getting to that Green Bay Trail with it being safe? Because right now, especially at rush hour, if you try to ride your bike through town, it's a very nerve-wracking experience. So those are more my questions. Why is this viewed as a safe option to have buses, bikes, and cars all in the same area?
Thank you. So that's another thing. Please, no applause, no hooting and hollering.
It's your last meeting.
We're going to hoot and holler when the meeting's over. Please.
I'm John Galanti. I do not live on Central Street, but I live farther north. But I have a question also. In order to evaluate which of the options to have, one of the questions I have is there a lot of bike traffic on Central currently that has a problem? And if not, are we looking at a problem or a solution for a problem that doesn't exist? And I was going to say the point that was just made, which is once a biker gets into town, isn't that going to cause an incredible amount of confusion for everybody?
Thank you.
I wanted to speak. I'm Jennifer Giller. I'm at 715 Central. And I know that there has been a parking study that entailed somebody coming through town and telling how many people are parked. But to me, and I believe I speak for everybody on Central, that doesn't provide an accurate picture of what parking is like on Central year-round. It doesn't take into account what happens when Northwestern has a game. It doesn't take into account what happens when summer comes and people use Central to park to go to the beach. It doesn't take into account what happens when one of the many organizations that are on Central have events, and that not only includes a school, it includes Sukkot Shalom, it includes the Masonic Temple, and it also includes overflow from downtown. There are times when there is no parking on our side streets because of these events. And I would strongly urge the board, if we're going to seriously consider moving forward with either option 3 or 3A, that they take the time to survey the residents who actually live there and experience it year-round and understand what you can't possibly understand by coming through and doing a random tally. That combined with the safety concerns, I won't go into detail, but I did provide some statistics that show, based on a study conducted in Chicago, published last year and sponsored by the Transportation Research Board, that Sharrows are unsafe. They don't increase bike traffic. I know that's the goal here, and we all have this image of Central being the new Sheridan, but they're unsafe. And we also don't have the driveways that people have on Sheridan that can easily fit, on average, 5+ cars. So for all of these reasons, I am very hopeful that the board will take into consideration not only the practical side of this type of change, but most importantly, the safety aspects of it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Bob Hauschier, and I own Morning Glory Flower Shop, so I'm going to be coming at this from a slightly different perspective, from a delivery standpoint, as if we have some sides of the roads that have no parking versus other sides that have no parking. It's going to be very difficult for my trucks and all other delivery vehicles to figure out where they can and can't park. We're going to have to turn around. So it would be more of a logistical issue for us on what side of the streets would be open for parking and what not. So I am in favor of choice 1.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Lisa Filer. I live at 606 Central, and I've been there for about 16 years. So I am strongly in favor of option 1 because, like the speakers before me, I'm concerned about the safety issue. I'd also like to throw out an option 4, if that's possible. I know you probably don't want to hear it. But if we're looking at what's best for Central in total, I actually think making it a not through street to cars and then adding in a bike path throughway would actually get to a very good solution. Take the buses off, basically not make it through to Sheridan for cars. That would slow down people. And then you could add a bike path. So, something for thought.
Thank you.
Hello, I'm Karen Miller. I live at 1007 Lake Avenue in the village. I just have a question. Currently, Greenleaf is marked as a bike trail going east. Is that not being followed up on? I am puzzled. I mean, the signs are up there.
It is a signed route, yes. Greenleaf is a signed bike route.
So that is not being considered anymore for use?
No, it would continue to be a signed bike route. We're not proposing any changes to
Oh,
Greenleaf.
I see. So
This would
Central
be an
Street
addition.
would be an addition to that. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Gary Thompson. I live at 527 Central. I have more questions than statements. Question 1 is there currently a problem with bicycles on Central Avenue that we're trying to solve?
I don't think that we're trying to solve a bicycle problem. What I think that we're trying to explore is we have a once in a lifetime opportunity to do something, and should we be considering something different?
And to add to that, the village passed an ordinance called a Complete Streets Ordinance, which basically says when we have major reconstruction projects, we try and be inclusive in the way that we design them for all modes of transportation, including pedestrians, people who are commuting, bikes, cars, etc. So we're in compliance with that.
The other thing that I would note is on the parking counts, times when they were taken. But on school days, drop-off time in the morning and pickup time in the afternoon, most of the counts didn't include those time frames. None of the time frames include the summer evenings, when most of the parties that are outside and the biggest along Central Avenue happen. Therefore, for instance, between 5th and 6th, this noted a very small amount of cars in any of the counts where the maximum was 6. On a evening when someone's having a party, the entire street is full of cars on both sides of the street. So, and frequently there are lawn service people who have their truck and a cart, which takes up about 3 spaces, and you can have 2 or 3 of them along our street in that block on any given day at some time during the day. And so I live on the south side of Central, and so if 3A goes into impact, then everybody who parks on Central that comes to my house has to cross the street, whereas currently they don't. And so that introduces an element of danger that doesn't currently exist. And so I think for the people that live along Central Avenue, the best option is to maintain parking on both sides of the street.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Dave Taylor. I live on 234 17th Street. Okay? And I think we're looking for a solution to a problem that doesn't exist. Okay? You personally passed some legislation which said that you have to extrapolate ahead. Yeah, but extrapolations are based on what we know now, right? And so the question is, where's the problem? I proceeded to plot myself down in front of 605 Central Street this afternoon from 2:35 to 3:35, okay? 1 hour. And I counted the following, right? 190 motor vehicles per hour, right? 19 pedestrians, and 6 bicycles. Okay? So where's the problem? The 6 bicycles hardly justify turning the entire Central Street upside down with all sorts of very, very elaborate, well thought out, I grant you, programs. Okay, one should remember that anything that is done is going to last for now till, as you said, the future, and it's going to exist for 365 days a year, 24 hours a day. Okay. Now then, on a typical day, we find 6 bicycles. Okay. Does that justify these very elaborate plans, and which are, in fact, somewhat confusing? You'll turn traffic engineers loose, and you get the mess that you now have at Green Bay Road and Central, Green Bay Road, Ridge Road, and Emerson, right? I mean, people are constantly ending up dodging from lane to lane, trying to figure out what they're supposed to do. So my point here then is that the problem doesn't exist. Okay? So why are we going through all this trouble to try to solve it if it doesn't exist? Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Liana Billings. I live at 618 Central, and I'm in support of option 1. I mean, I think there is a problem that does exist, and it's the potholes and the horrible street conditions on Central, which can be easily addressed by option 1. But I have a few concerns. Primarily, if we take parking away on one side, and I think someone mentioned similar to this point, is that a lot more people will be crossing the street, including families with small kids, and it's I think, a danger to the people crossing the street. I also think of my mother, who's 75, and my grandmother, who's 98 years old, crossing the street as well when they want to come visit me, and these are real concerns I have for people coming to visit my house. With the crossing the street, plus with my own children. Also, I don't quite understand, especially with option 3A, how it works as far as school pickup, because if the south side parking is taken away, you just have the north side pickup lane, and if you want to pick up your children, a lot of people will you want to go pick them up, parking rather, if they're small, like in kindergarten, first grade, second grade, where you don't want them to walk out by themselves, you need to park on the south side in order to get close enough to the school and then be able to walk them back to the south, so you're not walking, way down past the parking or the pickup lane, if that makes sense. So I think that might be a logistical issue with the south side being taken away. And then I was a little confused with the diagrams as far as, we talk about the percentage of parking that was used at any time of day, but did we figure out if that parking goes away, is there space on side streets to actually accommodate those parkers? I understand we're not really maximizing the available parking on Central, but do we actually know that they can be accommodated elsewhere within a reasonable distance to where they want to park? Furthermore, as far as the landscape trucks and other utility vehicles, Peapod and other delivery things that are parking, it's quite frequent on Central, obviously, because it's a residential street. They take up quite a big portion of the street. So I just think as far as, I don't actually know how a landscaping truck would park across the street and be crossing their equipment across Central. Even with the biking, is kind of hard anyway past all these different wide vehicles. And then me personally, I think probably partly the reason for bikes not being on Central is I personally would not ride with my kids or myself down the street on Central. We use the sidewalk, especially with the city buses coming down and the higher traffic volume. It's not a preferred route for me, so I don't see really a need for a bike lane. I have a high priority on that street to start with. So thank you.
Thank you.
Hello. Eric Billings, 618 Central. So I agree with everything my wife just said, so that's a good thing.
Smart man.
The only thing I wanted to add, my main concern is speeding on Central. And I think it's an issue today, and I heard there's some studies that say that it's not, but I believe that it is. And I think it's an issue along the whole street, not only in front of the residential, in front of the houses. I think it's an issue in front of the school, which is a big issue. And it's an issue as well as you approach going westbound into the city where the speed limit goes from 30 to 25. What happens is people are already at 30 miles an hour and they're racing to get to the traffic light, and it is a disaster in the downtown area as well. So I think that can be managed in a variety of ways. But the problem I see with this particular or 3 or 3A is essentially what you're doing is you're going to be widening the space for cars. So I understand that there are going to be shared lanes, but because Central is a straight shot right through with a wider lane with the bike lane and the car, you're going to encourage even more speeding, and I think that's going to be a big issue. I would never use the shared lane with my kids. I wouldn't use it myself. I think it's too dangerous for that reason. So I would actually, I'm pro-bike and I want good bike solutions, but I think this is a false sense of security, and I don't think it's the right direction at all. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hey. My name is Jeff Cupitz. I live at 609 Central. I've lived there for over 24 years. So I'm speaking as somebody who commuted by bicycle to downtown Chicago in the Loop for over 15 years. So I love it. I think biking's great. But I have not spoken to one Central Street resident who didn't agree that the ability to park in front of their house wasn't a part of the decision to buy that house. Condensing those spaces will affect all residents. It changes the character of the neighborhood in a way that most Central Street residents don't want. We have buses coming down Central. I get it. It was like that when I bought. It's going to be like that long after I'm gone. And that's part of the deal, and I get it. But there's bike lanes 1 block south on Greenleaf. They got the bike lanes, we got the buses, and everybody can park in front of their homes. And it works for the residents. So I just don't understand the need to duplicate what exists on Greenleaf. I echo the speeding commentary of the previous speaker. And then finally, if this 3 or 3A goes through, will Wilmette accommodate new driveways at existing homes so that we can park in front of our homes? Because you're changing the entire neighborhood up to if you go through with one of these others. This is why we bought here. We live in the suburbs. No, we don't use up all the parking, but nobody wants to. They want to park in front of their house. You want to have room for guests. You don't want to say, hey, block down. Make sure you jam in front of, like, Bill's house that has 3 cars in front of it already. And that's what we're going to end up with. Thanks.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Nidhi Verma, and I live on 710 Central Avenue. First, I'd like to echo the research studies that Jennifer Giller talked about, and I've done similar research. I actually do research for a living, and I've read multiple studies that continue to prove the fact in a very profound way that widening the streets and accommodating bike lanes on a street that has buses is a sure shot way into having more accidents on that street. So I would be really concerned about the safety of people who want to bike on that street and on those shared lanes. That would be one of my concerns. Secondly, we all have a personal agenda, and my personal agenda is I'm raising a special needs child who's very unfamiliar with her surroundings. So when we have to get her in the car and you see these speeding buses coming in or speeding cars, we have to be very careful on which side of the street we get her in from so she doesn't have to go around, because she won't know if there's a car behind her. Somebody has to be around her all the time. This makes life very difficult for people who don't have normal children, who have special needs children, and need that access to parking space to get their children in and out of the house. So I think you should consider people on Central Street who will have to go through that disadvantage. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm Lauren Kogan. I live at 1020 Greenleaf for almost 34 years. A couple comments in favor of option 1, and I do like cycling, but not in this instance. I already see a lot of people, amazingly, when they're coming eastward on Central through town and they're about to exit town and they haven't been able to find a parking space to go to a restaurant, whatever they're doing, they make U-turns in the intersection of Central and 11th, or 3-point turns. If you take away parking further down between 11th and 10th and 10th and 9th, as you showed, where it's alternating on one side of the street, I think you're going to have more U-turns in the middle of Central in all of these different situations when people realize they can't park on the side they intended to. The other question I have is, where will bikes be directed to at Central and Sheridan when they're going in that direction? Once they get to Sheridan, will it just be turning right or left, or will there be some diversion there? And then the other thing is there were total counts shown on a chart that had 3 columns, one for each, I don't know if you want to put it up, one for each option, and then all of the different blocks, block by block, and how many cars had parked there, or how many spaces there were. And I think that adding up a total for all of the spaces that are allowed on Central and then comparing the different options is irrelevant, because you're not really going to have somebody park at 4th and Sheridan and walk to town. But block by block, it showed between 11th and 10th and 10th and 9th, if I have it correct, there would be fewer spaces because of what you'd be doing. And you have a lot of people now who want to come to Wilmette to go to the restaurants and whatnot, and it's very crowded, and it's nice on a summer night. But if you reduce more of the parking that's close to town, I think you'll just turn people away. That's all.
Thank you.
Joanne Murphy, 724 12th Street. I do not live on Central Avenue, but I think it's an injustice to deprive the Central Avenue residents of the right to park in front of their homes just for the sake of a few cyclists moving through the neighborhood. I think that getting groceries, children, and the handicapped and the elderly out of vehicles and safely across the street will now be a very real problem. I also don't want anything that would increase congestion in the downtown area. I live in the Central Village area and use the crosswalks frequently, and I do not want to now have to look at 3 lanes of traffic, 2 of cars and 1 of the bicyclists. I also have an issue with whether the bicyclists are really going to stop for people in the crosswalk or just try to swerve around them. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, I'm Tricia Giddy-Kanst, and I live at 614 Central Avenue with my husband, John Donahue, who wrote an extensive letter last week or the week before. And like my peers, I have many issues regarding the safety and the amount of activity that currently exists on Central. So I am voting for number 1, leave it as it is, just repave it. I love the concept of the bikes and the cycling. I'm an avid cyclist. I never ride my bike on Central. I never let my kids ride their bike on Central. We've got the buses, we've got the school, we've got the traffic. It was always a safety issue for me, so I would really urge the village to rethink that, unless we were going to possibly eliminate the buses. That's not going to happen. A perfect solution, or it would have been, if we had thought of this before, was the Sheridan Road. I know there was talk of having an outlet from Sheridan into the village. Sheridan Road to 10th into Wilmette, where there are no buses, there are no schools, there's no parking, there's 4 homes on 10th and Wilmette Avenue that face right on the street. All the other homes have their attached garages, and so parking is not an issue. And I thought that would be lovely to come Sheridan Road to 10th Wilmette into the village of Wilmette. But I don't think that's an option before us. But I'm sticking with number 1. Thank you.
Don Steffen, 719 Central. I spoke at your last meeting, mentioned that I've lived in that home for 43 years. You might be happy to know I'm not here to complain about parking. Since our car was destroyed on Central Street 2 years ago, an eastbound truck was confronted with a westbound bus and decided his only option was to run into my parked car, and it was damaged beyond repair, which cost me quite a bit of money because the insurance obviously didn't give me the value of the car. My concerns primarily are safety and congestion. And I have some questions. I came to the November meeting, I came to the last meeting. I've not read the voluminous amount of material that you have put forward, which I certainly appreciate, and which the engineering firm has put forward. But remind me of a couple of things. How wide is Central Street on average between 11th and 4th?
On average,
34 feet.
Yeah.
Okay.
38 and 34 feet.
How wide is Greenleaf on average between 11th and 4th? 36 feet, right in the middle. Where are there bike lanes currently? Greenleaf. There
We
are
need to
7
clarify,
pardon?
there are not bike
There are not
lanes
bike lanes. It's a
on
designated
Greenleaf.
bike path.
Why are there stripes on both sides of Greenleaf for parking?
For parking.
But there are no other streets with lines like that, including Central Street. Why did you put those lines down there several years ago at the same time you put up all those bike path signs?
It's very common to stripe in parking lanes as a measure of traffic calming. It actually slows traffic. Same thing was done on Wilmette Avenue, west of Green Bay Road.
And we'll likely recommend we do a similar striping on Central when Central's done.
Well, I'm especially if you're putting bike lanes in. Does the federal grant require that you have buses, automobiles, and bikes?
No.
Does it require any combination of vehicular traffic?
Cars.
Okay. The bike lanes on Greenleaf are well marked all the way down to 3rd, where it turns left. The arrow turns you left. It passes Central Street without saying turn right, which is, I think, part of the argument of this is to have Central be the conduit into the park. It also doesn't tell you if you go all the way up to Washington to turn right there. So the bike lane, which is marked Lakefront Path this way, disappears at 3rd and Greenleaf. To me, it's inconsistent with what you're trying to do. One other thing that I'd like to mention is the speeding issue that the gentleman in the 600 block brought up. The speeding on Central Street, the study, who did the study, the police department or the engineering department?
Engineering department conducts the studies.
Okay, would it make sense, or does it make sense to do a speeding study between 5th and 4th where there's a stop sign? Of course people aren't going to speed unless they're going to run the stop sign. Why did you choose that block to do a speeding study? Go to the 700 block where I live and do a speeding study. And by the way, among the speeders, the worst speeders are the buses. My final comment is simply this. My final comment. Oh, I'm not last. I thought I'm sorry. Final one is, look, Greenleaf, Central, buses, bikes, one or the other. Don't combine them all on Central. Thank you.
Hi, Kathy Hyder, 629 Central for 25 years. I think the driveway issue has already been addressed. I don't want to keep repeating the same thing, but I would point out, I think the way they decided where to put the no parking on the north and no parking on the south is pretty random, because they said there are 8 driveways between 8th and 4th, but there's only one between 6th and 7th. So you can't, it just doesn't help if there's only one.
Address us, don't address the consultants on the project.
No.
Speak in the microphones, everybody can hear.
Okay.
We're the ones.
All right. So anyway, the driveway thing has been addressed. That's a concern. Safety with buses and bikes and all the traffic, that's a concern. That's been addressed. The other thing I'd like to add on the speeding that I think would greatly slow traffic down, especially by Central School, would be a 4-way stop at 9th and Central. Central School is the only elementary school in the entire village that does not have an all-way stop at the school. So I think that would help. As he said, the speeding is slower where there is a 4-way stop at 4th, and that would give another one at 9th, and it would just, slow people down from just traveling quickly through that whole area. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Julie Adrianopoli. I'm at 711 Central. I have submitted in writing my comments. I have also submitted several pictures that highlight my concern about the lack of space to do everything that is being proposed on Central Street currently. I think it is a real potential liability for the city and for a risk for bikers. If there are not clearly marked, not just the little bike sign, but actually clearly marked lanes for bikes when the road is being shared by vehicles such as buses and cars who do speed on Central, and we see that often. So if I would put myself in a category of option 4, much like the person who spoke before. I am very much a supporter of active transportation and increased biking in the city. I would love nothing more to see that happen. But I think that there needs to be a master bike plan that the city funds and that is very thoughtfully done before any decisions are made about this. If there's a bike lane that is already on Greenleaf, why are we not kind of further pursuing that? Why are we proposing, are we just chasing these federal dollars to get everything done? So to close up, I will just say my issue is not about parking. I am fully willing to accommodate the removal of parking in front of my house, should that be the decision that is made. If that is the decision, I would request that the village remove or eliminate or waive fees for homeowners who are going to be losing their parking so that they can get parking pads, or the cost of parking pads behind their house might get covered, given that the parking will be lost. And in addition, again, if biking is to go on Central when it is a shared street with very large vehicles like buses, please consider marking the lanes, green lines, much like they are in Chicago or in Evanston, so that safety is prioritized in this process and not just trying to get done everything you want to get done because of this grant.
Thank you.
I'm Mary Lyman. I live at 638th Street. At the corner, I think my house is in that picture on the left. I have a Central and 8th Street address, or corner. The parking issue would not directly affect me because our house faces 8th Street. However, the people that it's going to affect the most are the ones between 4th and Sheridan. I biked along Central today, and I'm here to, I survived without a bike lane. But anyway, so between 4th and Sheridan, if you're going to completely get rid of parking there, I don't know where a guest is able to park to visit any of those people. And I'm saying guests. What about, not including workmen or whatever. If the northbound side, or 4th Street is the closest north-south street to, 4th is, I'm sorry.
That's okay, just.
4th Street is a northbound street, and it's the closest street, because you can't park on Sheridan. So if you go over to 4th Street, there is no parking from Central Street up until it hits Sheridan, because it kind of, or Lake, I think it is, Lake or Sheridan over there. On the south side of 4th, there's no parking from Central Street to the alley, and then one side of the street parking for 2 hours, and it's like very limited from the alley to Greenleaf. So that's going to inconvenience so many people. As far as taking away south side of the street parking between 11th and 4th, you're going to directly affect my village center, my businesses. I mean, I sat at Forever Young today getting a manicure and saw cars parked between 11th and 10th, and they were going into Village Center. I parked there because occasionally I do drive to town. And if I can't find parking in town, I'll park on the other side of 11th. You have the Masonic Temple, you have Sukkot Shalom, the Women's Club if it ever reopens. It's going to spill traffic over. First Presbyterian Church always has traffic parked on Central Street because they're competing with St. Francis. I mean, out of my house, we have a lot of windows, and I've watched traffic on this street in the 17 years I've lived here. Adding stop signs would not be a good idea because, I live at a corner with a stop sign, and it's a blow and go. I used to give out high fives to people who actually stopped, did a full stop at that. Anyway, I'm a huge biker. I grew up in the west side of Chicago, western suburbs of Chicago, in a Catholic family, lots of kids, one car, and the only place I got a ride to was church. So in order to get anywhere was to either bike or walk. And I, did triathlons and blah, blah, blah. But putting in a bike lane is no guarantee of safety. putting in that little thing over there, again, is a no guarantee of safety. I bike all the time, all over this town, and survive. So, and then I have this thing.
What is this thing?
It's upside down. It's bike. It was done back in the day. I know Chris Canning's name was on this.
Ms. Lyman, can you
explain
what this is for, and then let's move on.
Bicycle route, alternative bicycle route. You know, it's how to bike west.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so we are at the top of the hour. We want to hear from everybody who's supporting 3 and 3A. I'd like you to do a better job than the people that supported 1, who failed completely to say, I agree with the person ahead of me. So there's going to be a lot of people that want to speak on 3A, 3 and 3A, and we're going to limit that conversation to 30 minutes in total. Because we are going to get to the second half of the meeting promptly at 6:30. So those for 3 and 3A who would like to speak, please feel free to do so now. Please do state where you live and your full name. Thanks.
Good evening. I am Will Heelan. I live at 16th and Elmwood. Just want to comment, we have parking on one side of the street, and we do very well with that. I just want to thank the village for looking for ways to improve, transportation choices for other modes of transportation. I am an avid bicyclist. I rode 8,000 miles last year. Just a couple of things I want to say. If it's possible to make the road work better for bicyclists, more bicyclists will come. It will get used very well. Of course, there were only a few bicyclists on Central today. It was cold. It's not really bicycling weather yet for a lot of people. Another comment I'd like to say is people often mention that, well, the bicycles can use the sidewalks. When I ride, I'm riding around 15 to 20 miles an hour. Sidewalks are incredibly unsafe. Perhaps for small children, it's a good choice. But for most bicyclists, it is not. And so, again, that was my comment. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
My name is Barry Burke. I live at the corner of 10th and Lake. I agree completely with what Will has said. I just want to add a few other things. Number one is there are no bicycle lanes on Greenleaf, as it was pointed out, regardless of what people say. It's a bicycle route. Realistically, the only choice of from Sheridan Road to Green Bay Road is Central. You can't do it on Lake. Bicycles are prohibited on it, and you can't do it on Greenleaf because it doesn't go all the way. It doesn't end up on Green Bay, and it doesn't end up at Sheridan Road. I biked for more than 15 years to work. I took Central Avenue down to Sheridan Road frequently, came back there. As far as seeing parking, yes, there's a lot of parking when the school is letting out. But basically on the north side of the street, as everybody knows, it's basically drop off, pick up. Many of the streets in Wilmette either have no parking allowed or only on one side. People cross them all the time. You're going to have bicycles on Central Street whether you have a shared bicycle lane or not. I support option 3A because it loses the least amount of parking spaces to it. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Ken Sherline, I've been a resident of Wilmette at Isabella and Central Park for about 32 years. People have not focused on the reason people would want to be biking on Central, and the primary reason, I believe, would be teenagers wanting to get to Gilson Park. There is no realistic alternative for a teenager. You can ride on the sidewalk on Lake, which is several times more dangerous than riding on the street, or Linden has been removed from consideration for biking because it has been repaved with brick. And so really, for people, children that want to go to Gilson Park from anywhere in the Wilmette area, having Central available to these students, junior high through, when you're other than small children, is a very good alternative. And it should be part of a planning on how people will bike through the city to get to locations, especially the most important location that children want to bike to is Gilson Park. Also on Central Park Avenue also has parking on one side of the road, which has been no problem. And I do believe it is important the couple extra feet on a shared traffic lane makes a big difference if you're the one biking on the lane. And people seem to have confused talking about bike lanes, but we're not talking about a bike lane which is a dedicated bike lane marked separate for use of bicycles. These are shared traffic lanes for bicycles and other vehicles. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, Ken Obel, 221 Linden.
Just to be clear,
yes,
we have read all your material.
All right. Well, then
Okay.
I'm going to keep my promise and keep my comments
Thank
very
you.
short, and I'll
Well, I mean,
address.
you were very thorough, and I appreciate all the material you sent over, particularly today, the volume of material you sent, but I did get fired from my job reading the rest of your material, but I read it all.
The exhibits are long. The letter wasn't
they
so
are.
bad. Well, thank you. I'll just address a couple of points that are not in the letter, some additional things, and just a couple of things I heard here. First of all, just listening to the people who supported one, I just want to say I hear a lot of things I agree with. I think maybe there's areas for common ground. I mean, Wilmette Citizens for Active Transportation, I mean, we think the speeds are too fast on Central. I think the studies, because they average the speed and they don't show a histogram, as one of my mathematical minded Central Avenue neighbors pointed out, even where it averages 5 miles per hour above the speed limit, that could be a combination of people driving extremely slowly and a lot of people driving very fast as well. So I would invite you to take a look at the breakdown of that. So we agree that speed should be lower, and if people don't feel safe crossing the street, I mean, they should feel safe crossing the street. We're saying people should feel safe crossing the street. They should feel safe walking down the street. They should feel safe driving on the street. They should feel safe biking on the street. So that we have a lot of agreement there. But, people are going to bike on Central, as we know. So this is a question not of solving a problem. There's not a problem per se. It's a question, as I think you understand, of an opportunity that we have. And, we're going to build the street. How are we going to build the street? I just want to make a process point. I don't know if it's really too late to make this point because the process is underway. But I just think there's something about the process that feels a little bit unfortunate to me. I mean, it feels like, you have the public meetings, and first of all, we fragment the issues, right? So, like, we're looking at this decision point about bike lanes and this decision point. We're not looking at it holistically. I think when you take issues and you break them down into these little slices, I don't think you're making good decisions or realistic decisions, and I think you make things very dichotomous and very confrontational, and I think that's what we see at these meetings, even though I think there are a lot of opportunities for common ground here. And so I just wonder if, in addition to public meetings, there aren't opportunities for, I don't know, you planners call them charrettes and other kinds of things where people get together and it's more around the table. I mean, a little bit like that first meeting, although there wasn't so much direct conversation, it was more mingling. But I just think that, in addition to public meetings, it'd be great to get some people around the table in a formal...
I don't mean to be rude, but let's stick with 3 and 3A and speak on that rather than...
Well, I support
process
anything,
process.
any shared lane markings. That's obvious. I did say in the letter, I think we did pass by option 2 very quickly at the last meeting, and especially looking back at the original engineer's proposal about the road widths. I just feel like we've gone through option 2 too quickly, and it sounds like some of the opponents, people who support option 1, are actually saying, if we're going to do something with bikes, let's have lanes, and I certainly agree wholeheartedly. So obviously I support a shared lane if that's the only option, but I do feel like we passed through consideration of dedicated lanes a little bit quickly at the last meeting, and as I stated in the letter, I think there are some opportunities to revisit that. So thanks for your consideration, and good luck.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name's John Levani. I am at 803 Chestnut Avenue. I also am an elected official in town, so I understand the issues that you all are dealing with. The only comment that I would like to make, broadly speaking, is I'm very much in favor of any way that we can improve the east-west active transportation across town, both as a park commissioner and as a resident. And the other thing I'd like to point out I have a lot of friends that are on Central Street, some of which have already spoken this evening, and I just want everybody to consider the holistic issue of the village as a whole. I mean, we're not trying to solve a problem here. We're trying to make our village better. That's what all of us that actually put ourselves up for election attempt to do, is to make our village a better place. And so you all are looking at this from or I hope that you look at this from a holistic perspective and consider all the residents in the community that are affected by your decision. Thanks.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Beth Drucker. I live at 2500 Greenwood Avenue. I'm a member of Wilmette Citizens for Active Transportation. I want to thank everyone for being open-minded to trying to come up with a decision for making our whole community safer for biking and walking. Statistics show that the more people walk and bike, the more vibrant a community is. It improves the business district. And one thing we're not talking about is that the people who are biking on Central Street may well be coming into our business district, and that every single person on a bike is a parking spot that is not needed. So I think that's important to keep in mind. And I was impressed by the fact that the parking was 20 to 30% capacity along Central Avenue. I'm sympathetic to everyone who wants a parking space in front of their house, but I was surprised by how low those numbers were for the actual usage of the parking on Central Street. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Nancy Schofer. I live at 325 Sheridan Road in Wilmette. I've lived there for 43 years. I have been involved with bicycling and bicycling advocacy for much of that time. When I moved into that house on Sheridan Road, you could park in front of my house on Sheridan. None of us has a driveway on Sheridan. Not too many people park there. It could be done, and I think that was never an issue for us. There was, as I said, I've been involved in bicycling advocacy in Wilmette for 30 years, and one of the things, among the things we did was we had a consultant and we created a bicycle route system and publicized it along with safety information, and I think that was well received and accepted. And among the achievements we had were there was a connection to get under Sheridan Road at sort of, I won't say the south end, but south of Central. There's an undergrade connection between the east and the west side of Sheridan Road for people who want to get to Gilson, who may come down Central. We went through some of this bike lanes and bike paths and bike routes when Wilmette Avenue was repaved from Sheridan to Ridge. And people said, you can't ride on Wilmette Avenue. You can ride on Wilmette Avenue just as you can now ride on Central Avenue. No one will make you do it. It's not required. There are people the reason people ride on certain streets is they want to get places. For example, the business district, the lakefront, the train station. I think that part of what you get when you get signage and on the street and on signposts for bike lanes is you raise everyone's awareness that there will be bicyclists here. As I say, no one will make anyone ride there, but you may have more bicyclists. As someone in the previous group said, we don't have a problem now. Are we going to create a problem? Of course, we hope not. But again, if you are in the business district or want to get to the business district, it should be possible to get there, and it would be helpful if the village acknowledged there will be bicyclists here, and let's make it I would use the word safe. There are no guarantees of safety. Along with any bicycling project or any street project, safety and education are important. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Mike Knippen. I live at 1139 Manor Drive in Wilmette. I didn't come here to speak tonight. I basically came here to listen. But after listening to the people in favor of option 1, I don't want to be dismissive of their concerns, but their concerns are not unique whatsoever. The problems they express about safety and speed are village-wide. So they can't address it as Central Street. It's just them. It's all of us. I live on the west side of Wilmette. I would love to be able to get to downtown on my bicycle. It's really not possible at the present time. People that come to downtown would like to be able to go back and forth on a bike. Now, the village has a complete streets ordinance. The village can shape the downtown and Central Street for the next 50 years by doing the right thing and going and doing 3 or 3A. This opportunity is not going to come along again. It'll be it won't be a disaster if you choose one, but you will have blown the opportunity to do something very special for part of Wilmette, all of Wilmette, just not the residents of Central Street. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Krista Gallagher. I'm at 706 Forest. I've been in Wilmette for about 2.5 years, and we love biking everywhere. I agree with what everybody ahead of me has said. I just have a question. Is there a way, from an engineering perspective, to say, because I hear what the people who are in favor of option 1 say. I mean, if you live on Central Street, losing your parking, where do you park if you have a party, all of that. Is there a way to set the signs, the no parking signs, to be seasonal? Because I don't ride my bike in the winter. I don't know that a lot of people do. Seasonal and by time of day. So if you hit 7 p.m., I don't know, but it's just a thought. Thank you.
Thank you.
That's a question. Hi, I'm Ryrie Pelleton, 1115 Lake Avenue, and I've been listening, and I came to the previous meeting, and there are a couple of things that strike me. I do want to second what everybody who's come before me in favor of the bike lanes has said, but on Lake Avenue, I have no parking in front of my house. Except on Sunday mornings when there's church, traffic there is super fast. There are still some people who ride their bikes on Lake Avenue. There is a need for bike lanes. There is a need to have east-west transportation, bike transportation, pedestrian transportation, and the only question that I see is how are we going to do it and where are we going to do it? You have a choice between, as somebody else pointed out, either Central Avenue or Greenleaf. And if you don't do it here, then please do it on Greenleaf. But as the other gentlemen were saying about looking at it holistically, my colleague on the park board among them, we want to make sure that people can get to the park and from the west side to Gilson and from the east side to the rec center and all the points in between. I want my sons to be able to go safely to and from school. And I don't know if I've said this to you guys, but I had a brother who was killed riding his bike to school and when he was hit by a bus. So I'm very sensitive to the danger of buses and bikes together. But that doesn't mean that you can't have a bike lane on a bus route. And I just want people to understand that, or I want you guys, because you're the decision makers, to look at this and figure out what are we going to do for the future. Do we want to minimize the number of bikes that are used in the village going forward, or do we want to augment the number of bikes that are being used in the village? And I think that the way to go is to add bike traffic, not to diminish it. And I was really sort of confused by the residents in the last meeting who didn't want bikes on the sidewalks but didn't want bikes in the street either. They wanted more bike racks, but you couldn't get to them by any known means of transport. So please, I have entire faith in you, but let's figure out a bike plan for going east and west in this village.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. So that closes public comment on decision point 1. That was a really good exchange. Thank you all very much for really sticking to the important issues that are in front of you, and for a good civil discussion on this. I think we need to make a decision, and so let's open it up for discussion.
Okay, yeah, I want to thank everybody also for coming out. There are a lot of interesting points and a lot of thought that went into this, and it's greatly appreciated. I guess I have a question for engineering, if this is something you'd be able to answer at this point. I had also thought, as I believe it was Krista mentioned, the idea of no parking seasonal and or time limited. Is that feasible from an engineering point of view?
I'll look to our consultants to confirm this, but my first reaction is it would be very, very difficult to do. Once you're signing and you're striping to tie that to a season or a time of day, you're giving a mixed message, because the striping is not easily covered up. It's going to be there. So if you're saying the lane is a bike lane, it should be a bike lane. You can't take that bike lane away and put parking there. It's either one or the other.
So you've got a sharrow, because we're not doing a bike lane. It's a sharrow. So it's it's just a wider transit lane that we're going to have presumably a sharrow in. So if you had the sharrow in it, how do you
can't put
make it? You
car
can't.
there.
Right.
Yeah, well.
And I suspect that the police department might not.
Yeah, and it's not the timing issue that I'm concerned about. I agree with a couple of the residents that talked about the counts being, I think, a little low based on the season. And my guess is when you have the peak travel times with bikes, it is going to correspond with the greater demand for parking.
Yeah, certainly beach season, that sort of thing. I could see everybody's going to want to.
Because that idea came to me when I was going through the packet myself about changing up the times. But I think those bike count baselines, or the availability is probably as low as we're going to see it all season. It's going to go up. The demand for parking probably goes up in the summer.
Yeah.
Got any thoughts on this?
Oh, is it my turn?
It can be.
No, I understand option 3 and 3A and combining the bikes, but I also do come down. I think if we go with option 3 or 3A, we are really going to change the character of Central. Central is not the busiest street in Wilmette, but it's also not the least traveled. The owners bought on that street knowing that they were going to be on a busier street, but that was mitigated because they could park on either side. And so I think if we push them to one side, that street will feel very congested when it looks on and more people park on one side. I am compelled to say, when the argument of we are now putting cars, buses, and bikes on one street, that is a big change of getting in there. When I think there are still other options. I know it's not perfect. We don't have perfect bike routes on the east side, but I do still see plenty of people biking. And I really just have a hard time giving up over 120 parking spaces in the village. If we continue to develop a vibrant business community, either downtown here or 4th and Linden, or obviously right across the street that I'm looking at, adding more residents, I'm not sure I'm convinced that giving up parking would be in the best interest of the long term of the village. So I'm still supportive of option 1. I think this is a great opportunity for us to improve the quality of the road. I think people will bike on that, whether there's lanes there or not, but they will use that. And we're going to take some steps to mitigate and make it a little bit safer of a street. But I'm supportive of the residents on Central.
Well, this isn't easy, is it?
This is the only agenda item tonight, right?
No, we have one more, so we're going to finish this up. You initially came in saying you're supportive of 3 or 3A.
Yeah, I still like 3A. I just feel like this is a time that we can make some changes. Yeah, it's going to be a change. And I think whenever you have a community such as Wilmette that's older, And yet the world is kind of changing. Sometimes things do change, and it's hard because we have the downtown right next to residential and a lot of things going on. And people are still getting used to how to interact with these different types of bike transportation, and not everybody, little kids I could see would not want to use this. And let me just mention, we are trying every way we can to find a way to do a comprehensive bike plan. It was going to be in the budget for this year. Unfortunately, there were a lot of things we had to take it out. We've applied for some grant funding. We're trying our hardest to get a comprehensive bike plan because I think that would help a lot in a lot of ways. Because there are various needs. There's certainly a need for east-west. There's a need for getting to places that you can't get to now. So just to mention that. But I'm still in favor of 3A.
Well, thanks for the support, the two of you. It's really phenomenal. I agree. We've been really arguing and fighting and trying to find a good east-west route. Greenleaf is what we have today, and perhaps it needs more signage. But we can't make more land. We can't widen the road. We can't make a bike path or trail anywhere. We're really it's an issue that we have to deal with. And as I think about it, I think, all right, can I live with parking on one side of the road? Lake, for example, is a busy road that is parking on one side of the road. And I totally appreciate the Park District weighing in as well as far as their needs. I come back to the question of, is this the right thing to do or a good thing to do? To go with option 1 or 3A. And I think it's a good thing to do. I don't necessarily think it's the right thing to do because I really weigh heavily the opinion of the residents. And the residents bought with some expectation, and so I respect that. I also respect the fact that we have buses running on that street, and somebody said it, buses on Central, you pay the price with buses on Central. Bikes on Greenleaf, you pay the cost, though there's not a high cost of having a bicycle ride by in front of your house. I understand the bus issue. And mixing buses with bikes is, not ideal, but it's not, I didn't find that to be a valid argument. I think we might need to, and so if you don't get it, I'm supporting 1. I think we need to address whatever the signage issue around Greenleaf is and somehow figure out how to make sure that we connect Greenleaf appropriately at the end of Greenleaf to the park. Because if that is the safer street, it's of good quality already, and we can't figure out, it's literally a block south. To me, it seems like I do like the separation of one from the other. It's a shame because we've got a school where there's kids and we'd love to get kids on it, but are we really going to put what year do you begin to ride bikes there? 3rd grade? Second grade? Are you going to put a 2nd grader on Central? I don't think you're going to do that. It's, this is for the more mature bicyclists rather than the child bicyclist, the more experienced rider. And they're going to ride on Central anyway, whether there's a share on it or not, whether there is parking on 2 sides of the street or 1. They're going to gravitate towards it because it directs them right into town, it directs them to the beach, and it's going to be the nicest road in the village for quite a while. So, I'm leaning towards 1.
Is there, I mean, this is, because I know it's federal money, but, if we went with 3 or 3A, you're going to spend the money on striping. Since if we go with option 1, you're not going to spend the money. Is there a way that you could use some of these funds to support the bike program somehow, some way, and say part of this?
No.
So
she's not direct at all.
So the question was,
could you use some of the funds to help with the overall bike plan that Trustee Wolf mentioned? And I knew the answer because it is federal. It's not Wilmette money.
But You know, it seems like things are going toward option one. But, you know, I think that some of the things that were mentioned tonight about Greenleaf, some of the things are pretty easy fixes, making sure that there is continuous direction. It would be probably a couple signs and a little bit of a review, and it could be improved significantly with just about zero cost.
Yep.
So, Bridget, I think what you're hearing from the committee is to pursue option one. We didn't talk about this, but I think if there is the option for that appropriate white edge line, you know, we should build that in. Traffic calming being important. I don't find any. I know we'd already talked about raised crosswalks or raised intersections, which I think is a great idea. I don't see that there's anything else that we need to be thinking about. I don't think that a single stop sign study has validated that we need a different stop sign or stop sign configuration on the street either.
Correct.
And curb extensions or curb bump outs at all the intersections, which is a pedestrian accommodation.
Yeah, I agree 100% about that line for traffic calming. I think that would be very helpful.
So everybody, thank you who was interested in that issue. We're going to talk, and this was not easy. Of all the great conversations and meetings we've had over the past couple of years on dicey subjects, this was one that it really does take a village to help figure out. So thank you. I think we have another short presentation on the back-in parking concept. So I'll turn it over to you.
Okay, so I'll let some people clear the room maybe.
I would move. We have 30 minutes, right?
Oh, if you haven't signed in and would like to sign in, we'd appreciate it if you would on your way out, so you can be kept informed about the status of the project. I think it's right outside. Please go ahead.
So we'll go ahead and proceed. The second decision point tonight related to the parking configuration within the downtown section of Central Avenue. There are two options that are being considered. One would be to maintain the existing angle-in, forward-in parking. The second would be to consider incorporating or changing to what you see on the slide, a back-in parking configuration. We're going to talk about what that would entail from a temporary condition and then also a permanent configuration. You can see here on the bottom of the slide how that would operate or how that would function. To the right, there's also a little graphic that depicts how the maneuver would be accomplished. Similar to parallel parking, you would have to pull ahead of the space that you're interested in backing into, and then you'd back in at an angle as opposed to in a parallel condition. So taking a look at the numbers within the downtown, you see beyond just Central Avenue, we took counts on other facilities along Wilmette as an example, and you see that there are actually 109 existing angle spaces, 100 of which are your regular with 9 handicap. So we took a look at what the impacts would be to institute this in a temporary condition. It was a point that was brought up at our last meeting on if there was an option to do this sooner than later, what would that impact be? So not changing the curb lines, but maintaining the curb line. We've come up with a quick analysis. This shows you from an aerial perspective what the existing configuration is today. So here west of Wilmette and Central, you see you have 8 spaces with 1 handicap there, and then 7 spaces with 0 handicap spaces in that location. If we were to restripe without altering the curb lines, without spending the money to reconstruct the curbs, we would actually lose 1 space in the configuration because of the way the curb line is set up, but you'd see how that would look there with the temporary paving and striping condition there at the bottom of that exhibit. So when we take a look at it from the same numbers that we have today, if we were to change this tomorrow and put in the temporary striping and have the back-end parking within these areas, we would lose 7 spaces in the downtown area. From a cost perspective, we took a quick analysis of what it would cost, and elements that would be part of this cost relate to resurfacing or seal coating those spaces so that you wouldn't see the pavement markings underneath them. There'd be some pavement repairs. For the final condition, we then would have curb and gutter, island and sidewalk modifications, pavement markings, and then, of course, signage. So you're looking at an additional $70,750 cost to incorporate the back-end parking configuration. This does not include any estimates in time. There would be some consideration for, at the very least, education, but then even on-site assistance, particularly when this would be first initiated, to help change behavior and understand what the back-end parking is about. We were asked to take a closer look at accidents within the downtown to get an understanding of, with the existing configuration, with the angled parking pulling in forward, what the accident history is within this location. There were 28 total crashes in the 5-year period from 2011 to 2015. This is along the whole corridor. 22 of those, or 79% of those accidents, occurred within the downtown, 8 of which were related to the current diagonal parking, where we had 5 backing into traffic from the parking condition and 3 sideswipe accidents. In this time period, there were actually 0 bike or pedestrian accidents that were reported. So on average, there's about an accident and a half related to the diagonal parking based on these figures. So we're here tonight to have this decision point as to whether or not we want to convert the existing angled parking, the front pull-in angled parking, to a back-in angled parking configuration. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions about that? I think we've...
No, I thought that was very thorough and helpful to see what all would be
I'm
involved.
sure since the last meeting, we've all spent a lot of time researching and trying to understand back-end parking better. I would like to go through the same process we went through. We do have to finish in a timely manner. Is there anyone here that would like to, or actually could I see a show of hands of people that would like to speak in favor of back-end parking?
Do we even need to speak?
Please come on up.
I'm Mike Whiteman, and I've been 25-year resident at the corner of Central and 11th. So what I know about is the accidents. And I feel you got the wrong sequence. You should first know where the cars are going to go, then know how to park. Because at 11th and Central, they say, well, this is where you do a roundabout. We have so many, I say, careless, thoughtless, or occupied drivers who use that in incorrect ways. And that would be more important to safety on what you're planning for. If you want safety on the moving part of the street, that comes first. That's what I think. So it doesn't matter too much. It's the traffic flow comes first, in my opinion. Okay.
Please.
Hi, I'm Beth Drucker, 2500 Greenwood Avenue, and I feel I'm sort of obligated to come up and say something because I do feel a little responsible for some of this debate and discussion. Last summer, Ann Nagel and I organized an Active by Design Summit for the North Shore of Chicago. We brought in a an expert called Mark Fenton. He goes all over the country. He's nationally regarded. Ann and I not only spoke with him in depth, but we spent 10 hours in 5 different walk audits in 5 different communities on the North Shore, and we were able to learn firsthand from an expert why this has worked in many communities and the many safety reasons why it does work. I'm very sympathetic to the concerns of the business community that no one will be able to figure it out and that it might cause some chaos, and I understand that they're worried about their revenues. I'm just concerned that if we go to all this trouble and we don't try to make our downtown better for cyclists and walkers, we'll have gone to a lot of trouble and expense, and we're going to have the very same thing that we started with. So we've done a lot of research, and we think that making the downtown better for bikers and walkers will be better for everybody. We understand that back and angle parking has created a lot of negative response. I just appreciate that we're at least talking about it. If now is not the time for it, we can watch other communities and see whether down the road it might work for us. I have thought, though, that if we ever wanted to do a trial, a short-term trial at 4th and Linden might be an option that would be far less expensive than what was just suggested in the slide. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Ann Nagel, 1139 Manor, and I thank you for your consideration of all these different modalities. I know that there is great concern about back and angle parking, and it probably isn't going to work for our town. That's okay, but as with Complete Streets policy, back and angle parking was a way to try to mitigate bicyclers getting through downtown. If that goes away, I ask you to please consider other options to get bicyclists safe through our downtown, not just to the edge of our downtown. We had an opportunity to meet with Julie, and she was very open, and I think we had really good conversations. And what I said to her is that if that wasn't going to work, let's really enhance our pedestrian and bicycle access to downtown. It's going to drive our economics. It's going to drive people coming down and families coming down. So let's think about our young kids. Let's think about our teenagers. Let's think about the next generation. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Anyone else that would like to speak in favor of back-in parking? Okay. Could I see a show of hands of anybody that would like to speak? I'm afraid to ask this question. Anybody that would like to speak in opposition to back-in parking? Okay. So I want to give everybody an opportunity who wants to speak. It might make sense for Julie to come forward first as a representative of the village business owners and an advocate for the growth engine that is downtown Wilmette. Thank you for all you've done.
I am Julie Usum. I'm the Executive Director of the Wilmette Kenilworth Chamber of Commerce. And behind me, I have
Mike Donnelly. I'm President of the Wilmette Chamber of Commerce.
And I know that we officially submitted a letter that you've all seen with our points, and don't want to take your time to reiterate if you've seen them and read them all. We do have quite a nice showing of the downtown business owners here, but for those that were not able to attend for various reasons, we did circulate a petition, and we have 62 signatures on there from Wilmette business people opposing this concept. And so the Chamber's opinion really is that it's not going to be the answer. Obviously, all the business people and the Chamber of Commerce want coming to downtown to be a safe and enjoyable experience for everyone, but we don't think this is the right solution at this time. But I do know that you want to hear from the actual business owners because they're the ones with the skin in the game. So we're going to sit down, but do you want me to submit the petition with the original signatures to you? Do you want to see that?
Sure.
Okay.
Did you have anybody in your business owners that supported back-in parking? Just out of curiosity.
Well, we did an official. We did a survey by email And 78% of the respondents from Wilmette were opposed. We had, I think, about 6 people that were in favor of it and several that were undecided or, didn't want to voice an opinion. Though with the petition and the signature gathering, we did have some volunteer business people conducting that, and the feedback that I received was that no one verbally was in favor of it. And obviously they signed the petition opposing it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, business people, get up there.
Hi. Mike Chikazian. I'm owner of Napolita Pizza and also coworkers. And I'm also representing George Stavro from Valley Lodge, who left because he has to manage his restaurant. But and also Joe from Al's Meat Market also feels the same way. We're all very much against the back-end parking. We think it's dangerous. We know the idea of cars backing into spots and having exhaust coming towards customers possibly sitting on an area right there where they're seating. And the idea of losing 7 parking spaces is very upsetting. To lose 1 parking space, the parking, of course, is limited. And I think the other conversation, which is separate, is maybe we should talk about how we maybe enforce parking better, even though I'd get more tickets, but maybe having it go into the evening. But it's not enforced a lot, so we park there. We have employees who end up parking there, even though we tell them not to, for 5-6 hours. And it's supposed to be 2-hour parking, so that might help.
Unheard of.
Very much, yeah, exactly. Very much against it. Thanks.
Thank you.
I'm Matt Lambrick from Lambrick Jewelers, and my sister Beth and I have informally asked customers without goading them, just throwing the concept out there. 100% people were total panic. Are you kidding me? They're thinking about doing this. People, I guess some of my concerns, if you're driving forward and you're going to back in, somebody's behind you. You know how it is when you're parallel park. They pull up too close to you. You can't back in. You end up going around the block. And my other concern is what's to keep, and maybe Chief King could address this, what's to keep somebody driving west on Central from cutting right across traffic and pulling in forward? And I guess those are my 2 things, but we are really opposed to the concept.
Thank you.
Bob House here from Morning Glory Flower Shop. My mother-in-law lives in the community, and she's 86 years old. And as she gets on in her driving privileges, she is no longer in favor of backing up anywhere. So the idea of backing up into a space, she would not come to Village Center if that's how this was all going to go. She would just probably bypass the whole thing. So that's all I'm going to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Carlo Crani from Gusto Restaurant, 1146 Wilmette Avenue. I'll keep it short. I concur with everyone else that came up before me. I think it's the confusion, people pulling too close to you before you're about to park. I think it's going to do more harm than good, for sure. So,
thank you.
I'm Carrie Costello from DiGiulio Kitchen Design, and we're at 1121 Central. Reiterating kind of what Bob said, I think our concern is just that it's going to discourage people from parking. One question I had is, would the spaces be any larger? I think the spaces already are fairly narrow, and we notice quite a bit where people are, not even parking straight in the space, going straight, forward in. So I think if we're expecting people to back in, that could be a potential problem. And then also, I know with the restaurants that are around us, there's a lot of deliveries going on. It's very congested, and I think the backing in would just, it'll discourage people, and they'll move on. So we're against it.
Thanks.
Wendy Sharon, Executive Director at the Wilmette Theater. I agree with what everyone else has said. And from our customer base, we had 32,000 patrons last year. The majority of them are not from Wilmette, and particularly during the day, the average age is probably 75. We had someone in yesterday that was 98. And they are challenged enough with our parking situation, figuring out where the 2-hour parking is, where 3, where 4. And I really think this backing in would just drive them over the edge into other theaters. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Julie Cohn. I have the business Hubba Hubba in the downtown area. I agree with Julie Newsom wholeheartedly about all the points that she made. I've also been at my window of my business looking out at cars since I've been there for 2 years, and people are very challenged with just pulling in. And I've been taking pictures and sending them to Julie and other people in the village that on a daily basis there's a handful of cars who mess up parking and pulling in diagonally. So that throws off the other drivers. So I feel like if they can't get it right by pulling in diagonally straight, how do you expect them to back in reverse parking? I also feel drivers in general are not trained for reverse back-in parking, so you're kind of taking a leap of faith that they're going to transition into this new program, and I think that'll discourage a lot of people for shopping in the downtown area. I think the downtown area is thriving now. You have lower vacancy than ever before, so I think it's time to kind of monopolize on maybe slowing down traffic going through that area so people who are reverse parking out, pulling out of their spot, are watching out for cars or cyclists. I just think that there should be more feet on the ground watching what's happening because it's kind of really nice the way it is. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, I'm Laura Sale. I am a 25-year resident at 10th and Chestnut, right on the corner, and we have been now business owners at 4th and Linden for 2 years. I have been a part of a traffic study and a parking study to procure our space in that business, so I understand what this is all about. Deeply disappointed that we are even considering such a thing. I think that it's just absurd to think people who are not trained are going to be able to learn how to do this. I think we're going to increase our side swipes. I think everybody's forgetting, speaking of elderly people, of the 2 crashes at Plaza del Lago last summer and at the salon where elderly people jumped curbs and continued driving. What's going to happen when they're backing up and they hit people sitting on our sidewalks, dining on our corners that we're trying to increase? And please don't try this at 4th and Linden. Please don't make that the next project. I just think that this is a disaster waiting to happen. Thank you.
Thanks.
Hi, my name is Patty Evans, and I own Lad and Lassie with my sister Mimi. And I just agree with what everybody has said before me. I do think that it would negatively impact our business.
Thank
People
you.
would have a hard time.
Hi, I'm Mary Lyman again, sorry. 630 8th Street. One thing that I would recommend, we should drive to downtown Wilmette every day and spend money, but 2, we should drive to it, not through it. And I'm saying this, and I'm going to really regret advocating for this because I bike through downtown Wilmette all the time, but lately it's getting too dicey for me, and I'm going around it, if I'm heading west, because I go Eden's Plaza, I go, like everywhere, but downtown Wilmette is super congested these days in a grand way, and we really need to keep it like maybe just the 2-block area, a village center. Get off your bike, walk. Walk past that store, walk past that restaurant, read the menu, look and see what's in the window. Slowing people down on a bike will just be a little bit safer for all, and especially with all the tables outside and people walking out of a store. I lived in New York City, and a lot of people were hurt by people biking and, like getting run over by bicycles, just saying. And I'm a big bicyclist. 2, I agree with Laura Sally. I have a whole list of Wilmette's drive-in businesses: Panera, Lambrick Jewelers, Taco Lago, CVS, Massage Envy, Salon Fusion, Foremost Liquor, on and on and on. And Convito, Mike Chikazian just said 3 times was a drive-in business. And you know what drive-in business is? Salon Fusion. I mean, when a car drives into the business. So I'm so happy you're like... not thinking of the back end. I have a daughter who goes to school in Portland, Oregon. We go there all the time. Portland, Oregon just reversed angle parking. It was a disaster. The residents also want them to pull out the things that stick out over the pedestrian.
The curb extensions.
Yeah, the curb extensions. Bicyclists and pedestrians want to get rid of that. And I agree, because like when I bike down a street with a curb extension, so I'm biking near the curb, but then I have to pull out into traffic to go around that curb extension. So it's sort of like defeating a purpose for a cyclist, right? And the other thing is I have a list of all the Wilmette Downtown Village Center Wilmette residents, which is pretty long. I mean, they're all Wilmette residents who own businesses in town. And then the bottom is the ones that grew up here. So that's it.
Thank you very much. No, that's good.
So I am Margie Carabas. I own the Rock House in downtown Wilmette. I also am a resident living in Kenilworth Gardens in Wilmette. And I have 2 freshmen that are in driver's ed. And this is the scariest thing to think about, having to teach my twins to reverse angle park in front of my business is terrifying. I also have so many kids going in and out of my business on a daily basis that this is not a safe option, and I'm against it.
Thank you.
Hello, Eric Billings. So I think you can control and manage and diminish the issues with accidents by controlling speed, and potentially even managing people on cell phones and texting, et cetera, which I don't see enforced really anywhere anymore, not just Wilmette, but anywhere. So I think that would probably solve most of the issues we see, aside from biking, which is a separate issue. I think generally we need to make the downtown safe for small kids, and I can just imagine that being a bigger risk of some kid walking off onto a parking space that is where people are backing into. They're on their cell phone, they're in big SUVs, et cetera, it can't be seen, cameras notwithstanding, and I think there's a big risk there.
Thank you. Anyone else? All right, that closes public comment on this. Any discussion?
Well, I think the public has spoken. I think it's good that we have explored this, because it's good to think about new ideas, and this did come up because of the walk audit, and it is something that, some other communities have had some success with, and there seemed to be some interest in the community, and we've explored it, and it seems to me the answer is it's not a good idea at this time.
I agree on the exploration comment that you made, and one person said they were really disappointed that we were even considering this. We consider all sorts of stuff all the time. Not every idea is a good idea. Not every idea is right, but we think about so many things to improve the village. And so that's how this came to be. It came out of really good thinking from residents in the village that put forth an idea that they've seen potentially work elsewhere. Right for us, wrong for us. I think we're leaning towards it's wrong for us. But Dan, you may be the rebel tonight, and you can move to Portland.
No, unfortunately. Wow. I was just about to compliment you, Trustee Kruger, and say that's why you're the wiser trustee, and I aspire to be like you if I can stay 6 years, but 6 more years. But I agree. I'm not for it, but I also want to make sure, and I think Ms. Nagel, she may have just stepped out. It was a good exploration. It was worth talking about, and yes, I want to make sure we don't encourage no ideas. I mean, there's no bad idea. It was a good, healthy discussion. The community came together. I had some great conversations with some of the business owners, and I think actually how Ms. Nagel said it is, hey, it's not right for us. We're not ready for it right now, and that's okay. But at least it was a way that how do we make the village center better, safer, draw people in, and ideas. And really, it seemed like everybody came together and had a very healthy discussion, so I'd compliment that. But I actually agree with that statement. We're just not ready for it. It's not right, and I don't think this is where we should focus, how do we improve Village Center right now or make this change. So I am not going to rebel. I don't want to go to Portland just yet.
So I think it's safe to say you understand the direction that we need to be going. And that concludes the presentation and discussion and public comment about Central Avenue. Is there any, hold on, we're not done yet. Is there any old business? No. Any new business?
Can we thank you for your service since this is your last committee?
I was actually thinking, since this
yourself?
is my last meeting, yes, thank me. I wanted to thank you and Julie for putting up with this. And, of course, Russ, and Chief King for tolerating us through this, but most importantly, we should be applauding Bridget, who has been a steadfast supporter of ideas and getting projects done and managing us through many of these. So to Bridget, I want to say thank you very much. You deserve the round of applause. On that, I will entertain a motion for adjournment.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. We are adjourned.
Wow.
Note the time.
Yes, well done. A minute, 10 seconds.